Support Services. We are so excited to bring you this content today. We know how many families are struggling with their trans youth who maybe have taken this piece of what parents often call withdrawing or isolating from the world, especially early in transition. And it can be really concerning for parents, and it can be quite a piece of contention in the relationship between parents and youth. So today we have some folks that have joined us, and I'll have them introduce themselves in just a minute. But so that we can take some time to talk about what's worked for other people, maybe the mental health perspective that we're going to get, and also the perspective from a trans youth who has been on the other side of that piece of being so concerned that our kids aren't behaving in the way that we think that they should be and interacting with the world in the way that we think they should be. So we're going to kick it off first with introductions. I will turn it to Atlas, and then you can popcorn it to the next person.
Thank you. Hello, my name's Atlas. My pronouns are they, he. I am the Bilingual Youth Programs Coordinator for Trans Family Support Services. And I too was an isolating youth at one point. I am 26 years old now, and I am in grad school, so I feel like I've come a long way since then. Tracy?
Hi, everybody. My name is Tracy Lowenthal. My pronouns are she and her. I am a clinical community psychologist, and I have been working with trans folks for 20 years this fall, which is super exciting. And I'm just honored to be here today and hopefully offer some ideas that would be helpful. And Pam and Kelly.
My name's Kelly Keatley, and I'm the parent of a 26-year-old transgender woman. And we definitely have been on this journey of having a person isolate. Very scary. So I'm glad to be here.
And I'm Pam Valinette, she, her, and I'm the grandmother of Kelly's daughter, my granddaughter. Really glad to be here, you guys. I'm really grateful you're doing this.
Awesome. Well, welcome to all of you. We're really excited about this. And I just want to say that super excited to be able to bring in a grandparent's perspective. We haven't really done any of our YouTube videos from that perspective. And we know how many grandparents there are amongst the folks that we have worked with that are constantly asking and wanting, how else can I help? How else can I support? What else can I do? So I'm really glad that we have your voice in this. You know, if you're unfamiliar with Trans Family Support Services, we are an organization that was founded in San Diego, and we serve nationally. To date, we have served over 3,500 trans individuals and their families across the country and offer a plethora of services. I encourage you to check out our website if you haven't done that already. But in those thousands of families, so often in my work one-on-one with parents, this is what I hear is, you know, my kid's isolating, they're anxious, they're depressed, they won't leave their room, they won't interact, they don't come to dinner, they only have friends who are online. And it becomes, like I said earlier, this huge burden on parents often of how do I help my kid, what do I do? So I want to start this with a little bit of reframing that I do when I'm working with our families, of looking at it rather than from that place of withdraw or isolating, that if we can reframe it to our child is having this transformation trying to happen, and that we could see it as cocooning, right? Much like a butterfly does. And let's be grateful as parents that our kids feel safe enough in the four walls of our home to be able to walk through that transition, that transformation. For some kids, it's a short period of time. For others, it can be years worth of this piece of not putting an extra pressure, not coming at it from that this behavior is wrong or bad, but leaning into you take all the time you need in this transition that you have happening. So I'd like to kick it off first with Atlas, and let's kind of shape this a little bit to reframing from the youth perspective on what that time was like for you, Atlas, that you have already shared that you were an isolating youth, and maybe a little bit of what that perception for you looked like of how maybe your parents handled it and what we might be able to do better.
Yeah, so as far as I can think of myself, I feel like I was always a pretty shy and reserved individual since going into grade school. And growing up, it was difficult because it was very much like trying to find myself on my own behalf without any outside influence or outside information on or what to guide myself off of. So I feel that, like you said, the internet was one thing that was always there for me, and I always found comfort in presenting myself in ways that I couldn't really in person or in real life. So for me, one of the things that I often did, I really like playing online games where you can build your own avatar or a character. And I remember always being a certain type of individual or online presence. I never really showed up as who I was. I always said that I was a 16-year-old boy named Matthew, and that's how I pretty much navigated the online world, using that kind of persona that I built up. Um, and yeah, most of the time I was just in my room, probably since I was 11, 12, 13, just stuck in my room, playing games and just interacting with others for sure, but others on the internet who were probably much older than I was and thought I was someone completely different. Um, but even I think that's one of the things about me. I always like creating avatars and characters that were male presenting, um, a certain look, um, and I feel like that kind of gave me the opportunity to think of how I wanted to look at one point or in the future, or how I wanted to present. So I feel like that was one of the ways that I was able to express myself before I could fully express myself in person, to the full genuineness of how I felt. Um, but in regards to how my parents reacted, I feel like they were aware that I was isolating a lot of the time. They kind of didn't like that I was always on my computer. And well, I did have friends at school, but I didn't really interact with them much outside of school. And I'm really not sure how my parents saw this. I feel maybe they just thought I was a quiet young child who was probably self-preserving in their room. Um, but I feel that they didn't really push back on it much. I feel most of the time they just let me be.
Nice. And that piece around, you know, having a persona on the internet that you get to try on and practice with is something that we see happen a lot. And while we as parents, I think oftentimes look at that as not socializing, like you're just talking to somebody on the internet, but that is also socializing. And for us to have an understanding as parents that it is still filling some of that social role. Um, so, Kelly, do you want to share just a little bit about your family, how this started, and what kind of happened with your kiddo?
Yeah, well, it was very similar to Atlas's experience, I believe, but she started isolating even earlier before she came out to us. And she came out to us when she was 15. Um, so I remember distinctly around 8 years old, she would start going into her room, doing the Nintendo and but I was buying all the stuff for her, all the computer stuff. She was starting to isolate then, I started to become concerned. And I thought actually it was turning into an addiction is what I thought it was. It was like a gaming addiction. That's what I thought. But there wasn't anything that I really thought I could do about it. What really helped was when she did come out to us when she was 15, and in the course of that, talking to a therapist who said that essentially her gaming and her being online saved her life. And I truly believe it did, because she had so much suicidal ideation going along with the isolation. It was a very, very scary time. But I had faith that I held onto the words that the therapist said, and just put one foot in front of the other and made sure that I kept that contact with her open. So I was often asking her about what game she was playing. I would try to sneak in there and play a game with her when she would let me. I would always kind of kept this door open the entire time, but it was I was aware she was talking to people online, but then again, being of an older generation, I didn't know like the contact she was making with the people when packages started arriving in the mail with, female clothing. I was like, what is going on? But it all turned out to be really well. And I can say that it's been a journey of 11 years, essentially, of isolating on and off. And only recently, as she graduated from college, which I never thought would be possible, especially like Atlas being in grad school. It's such a tremendous thing. I can say now we're on the other side of it, and there's the tendency to isolate, but it's okay as long as that door is kept open in some form and holding on to faith. Everything has turned out pretty well.
And Pam, is there something you want to add to that? I know generationally it can be really challenging too when we think about, just that only having internet exposure for so long, and the expectations that, you as a parent had on Kelly growing up and socializing, and then you as a grandparent having on your grandchildren's around socialization and, appropriate behavior, if I could use that term.
Well, I I experienced a lot of different feelings. I got judgmental in my mind. I never said anything to anybody. Um, I felt deep, deep love and compassion for what the whole family was going through. And even though I was scared because there was a lot I didn't know, I was very careful not to ask questions because I felt that would put a burden on everybody. Like, okay, what am I going to tell my mom, or what am I going to tell grandma, or whatever? Um, and so I did a lot of observing and checking in with myself about how I was reacting to what I was seeing and hearing. And the main thing that came from that inside look was just compassion, absolute, total compassion and love. And I still have that today. The judgmental part went away a long time ago because Kelly um, and I talk about how I'm a researcher. Boy, did I go online and look up transgender and dysphoria and doctors. And I mean, I learned a lot. And so as I educated myself, I learned more how to become involved or not with the family. The main thing I did, though, was offer this love and compassion, both for myself, because I was grieving. This person I thought that was there is a different person, and I'm so happy. But, like, what? And so there was a grieving process, I think, for all of us that's very normal. So that's what I did.
I really appreciate your comment of what you could do to support or not. And that piece of, like, sometimes the best actions we can take in supporting people is no action other than just the unconditional love that we express. And that can be difficult because, our human society, our brains want us to do something, and sometimes not doing anything at all can be really best. So, Tracy, you've had years of experience working in this field and working with so many young trans individuals and their families. What can you share with us about parents navigating this kind of minefield sometimes of isolation and withdrawal?
I wish that everyone had families like Pam and Kelly, if I'm honest. That sounds like you all did such a good job of navigating this. I really want to highlight what you said, Pam, is normalizing the fact that there can be a lot of grief for families and that is okay. That doesn't mean you're a bad parent if you have grief, but finding a space to process that grief on your own outside of the presence of your trans youth. That's not their burden. That is not. We don't want our trans youth to feel like they're causing us distress with sharing their identities. In fact, we want to show as much support and joy as possible, and get the support for our stuff elsewhere. But I think with the isolation, everyone has said such great things today, is checking in, making sure that it's very clear that the door is always open, that you're a person of support. I know that sometimes texting is a great way, or social media conversations with kids, sort of online too. Texting them, sending them memes or little videos through TikTok or Instagram can be a nice way to start connecting also if they're really isolating in their room. Um, and just, I think I created a list earlier where it can be a little thing like a sticky note on a bathroom mirror that says, I love you, I'm so proud of you, or finding out the things that they're into, and bringing those things up in conversation when you're taking them to and from school, and just little ways to connect, and trying to recognize when it's your anxiety driving the connection or what it's actually useful for the child, right? Because sometimes we want a helicopter, and sometimes we need to land that bird and let the child be in charge of how much connection is happening. So checking in, is this me being anxious, or is this actually going to be supportive of my kid? I think is a good thing to stop and ask yourself.
That's an excellent point, using that piece of whose problem is this really, right?
Yes.
Because, like, Atlas didn't have a problem with having online friends and, dealing with the world in that way. But we as parents oftentimes are the one that it's a problem for us because our kids aren't meeting these expectations that we think they ought to, which are really, you know, oftentimes just a societal piece, and not even necessarily, if as a parent you can stop and reflect, it might not even be your own. It's just kind of that put on of, our kids are supposed to be out there doing so many different things, as opposed to allowing our kids to just be who they are. So, Alice, what's something, because you work with our youth, so not only your own experience, but getting to work with the kids in support groups and in the other ways in which you interact. What are some things that you think could be helpful for parents, that maybe this is a whole new concept for them, that isolating isn't such a bad thing, and that we could lean into, not having it be a thing of contention in our relationship? What suggestions might you have?
I would say, like Tracy mentioned, maybe trying to be more encouraging, trying to be more aware of what's going on with them. But also, if your youth is out, or you may have the idea that they may be out, or having a different identity than you're used to, maybe looking into it. Like Pam did a lot of research, educating yourself, what's going on presently, what's the newest term or labels, or even what's going on in the community, what's in the news and all that. Maybe engaging with them in that way, to show that you're interested, to show that you also care about those details, about maybe the community that they belong to, and what they may be worried about, if there's anything that they want to talk about or voice their feelings about. I feel like that would have been really awesome for me to experience. Unfortunately, I never even had an idea of what was going on. I didn't have the terminology. So that's one of the things that the youth of today are really different now, as opposed to 10 years ago when I was in high school. Um, they're really aware. They're really aware of who they are and who they wanna be and all the labels that exist and whether they wanna use labels, whether they don't like them, or if they're really questioning what's going on because of all the labels that we have now. So, I would feel that would be a really great way to interact and engage with them, just, getting up to the newest terminology or just reading about the current news of the state of our society in regards to gender identity and anything related to the LGBTQ community. That's just showing them that you also care about that.
I'm so glad you brought that up of the news piece because this is something I hear from parents is, I know my kids on the internet and they're probably reading all the horrific, hateful, violent rhetoric that's happening right now across our country. And so I loved Pam's piece of research, find the good things because alongside some of these really horrific things in the legislation in particular that's happening across the country, there are some good things that are happening and they're not getting amplified in the same way as the hate is. Last week I think it was that New Mexico deemed itself a sanctuary state for trans youth, and it was so quietly announced. And so that's a great thing to be able to, as Kelly talked about, texting things, and Tracy mentioned texting, memes and fun things, but finding the good news that's out there and sharing that with our kids so that hopefully they're getting a balanced diet between the hateful news and what there is still good news happening. There is still good things happening within the LGBTQ community. And I think that, as parents, making sure that we're putting that in front of our kids can always be helpful. Um, Kelly, tell us about when you started to see it change and maybe not quite so isolating, what that was like. Oh, I think you're
Very.
muted. There we
Oh,
go. Okay.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Um, it was a really, really gradual process, I have to say. And I think that things started to shift, oh my goodness, probably about 3, 4 years ago. And I can't really pinpoint exactly what switched, but I think it was the fact that my husband and I, who couldn't be here, he's working, but he would want to be here, just to say that we just held very fast to being stable, grounded, available, unconditionally loving parents, so that she always felt like there was that rock there, so that once she gradually came out of the isolation, um, she would kind of know what to expect. And she ended up going to college, which I never in a million years thought would even happen. I never thought she was going to leave her room. It was, I couldn't see beyond that. So the miracle of that, and just always, like you said, keeping the good things going. We'd always mention, good things about the community, and she didn't want to engage with the community, and she's just now starting to kind of like celebrate who she is and her identity, which is wonderful after 11 years. But my husband and I have made a point of going to Pride, and being involved with trans family support services, which saved us many times. Being involved there, our engagement, I think, slowly started rubbing off. And I think that probably helped her with her sense of isolation as well. And then also in terms of her mental health, always being there for her mental health issues. Both my mom and I, just constantly checking in, and thank goodness she does the research, to find the best mental health, that we could find and afford and that kind of thing. And that's really, really helped too. And she's finally found something that's really working for her mental health wise, which is great. So it's all just kind of come together, but it's definitely been a very, very gradual process. But I think it's been just so important to keep those known things there for her, and for ourselves too, to be very grounded. And, we've really, really just grown even more as a family. We've gotten tighter, and, we're kind of united in like being strong for her and strong for us. And, again, just that unconditional love. I would say that's primary. It's that basic, just being constantly a source of love. And then knowing that this journey and the isolation is not linear by any means.
Yes,
And I wanted it to be linear. I wanted it to be, okay, this is going to happen. We're going to get here. It's going to look like this. But no, now it looks.
I remember you asking me, how long is this going to take? Yes. Yes.
Right.
Tracy, have you seen that same thing that Kelly was referencing with youth of not wanting to be a part of the trans community, and parents really trying to push? Like, how have you had those conversations?
Yeah, 100%. I think that sometimes parents, in their desire to be supportive, are like all in suddenly, and obviously that's the better outcome than not being in at all. But I think it can be overwhelming for youth to be like, oh crap, now I've shared this part of myself with my family, and now we're supposed to go to pride parades, and I'm supposed to wear this and have that sticker and all this stuff. And trans youth may just want to chill for a while and explore who they are and learn about it. And not everybody wants to be involved publicly or an activist or anything like that. And so, remembering the personality of the person that we're talking about too, and figuring out what's comfortable for them. And some people don't want to be involved early in their exploration, and then they move toward that later. But it's the expectation that is a part of development, I think, is something that we have to kind of let go of, because that's not the right thing for everybody.
Yeah, and that piece of, all the experts in the field tell us our job as parents is to follow the lead of our child. And as a parent, that's not easy to do. Especially as a parent of young adults, it feels like it's even harder to do. I don't know why. But that piece of, following the lead then, and for parents who want to be all in, and making it okay if your kid's not in, but making sure your kid's okay if you're all in. Your kid may not be okay with you being visible in the advocate piece of the community and being a strong, visible ally. There are many ways to be an ally that doesn't have to be visible, that doesn't necessarily have to out your family as a family with a trans youth. And so that piece of honoring where your kid is in that, I think, is really important. So, Tracy, you did this beautiful list of suggestions for parents. It's going to be available on Instagram and throughout, I believe, our website and such. So, folks can find this list of suggestions that are just really basic and simple, but not necessarily easy. And so, how might you help approach for a parent who is in the hardest place of the devastation of their child not doing well, and mental health being a real issue, and that fear between, my child may be suicidal, but they're also disengaged, and I don't even know how to check on them. I don't even know how to gauge, is this, do I need to take action today, or are they going to be okay for the next 24 hours?
Yeah, I think I really love that you said that, because it can be so scary, right? We wonder, is it okay to keep asking? Is it okay to check in? And I think that if you're not sure if your child is safe, you have to ask, even if you're annoying them, even if they seem bothered, even if they're annoyed with you, you're still communicating that you love and care about them by asking. You can also, I would recommend setting up a system with your kiddo about, hey, there are going to be days that I'm worried about you and you may be fine. Is there a way that we can set it up so that you'll let me know when you're not feeling fine? So, sort of come up with a plan on the days that you might be feeling really suicidal or really dysregulated and upset. How might I know that? And that's a conversation I would have with them when they're generally doing well. Hey, in the future, when I notice that you're feeling crummy, can I keep asking you? Is there another way that I should connect with you on this? And sort of get your kids buy-in on what that process would look like. But I think everything that we're talking about today is it doesn't have to be a big significant thing. It can be small little actions, asking how they are, bringing them a Starbucks, well, obviously knocking and then coming in with something that they enjoy doing or eating, or inviting them to something. Just keep doing those things. And I think one of the things we're talking about today is so important. We keep saying isolation, but I think that's isolation based on our lived experience as people over 35 or 40, right? Like, we think being in our room online is isolation. It's not. It's just a different kind of socialization. And it's not one that we grew up with. So we have to sort of check ourselves on that stuff too, and ask our kids, who are you hanging out with online? What are they like? Where do they live? What are they into? And those conversations, I think, can open doors too, because our kids know when we're freaked out that they're isolated in their room. They know we're worried about that, and they know that we don't get it because they're not actually probably isolating. They're doing a lot of socialization. So trying to remember that too.
Yeah, that's a great point. And maybe even Atlas talked about vocabulary a little bit and all the labels, and maybe even leaning into finding new words, right? Asking your kid like, okay, I've been using the term withdraw or isolating, but I know that that's not what you're doing. So what word can I use to describe this phase that you're in right now, that we are in as a family? And that just gives buy-in for everybody then to come up with some new language. I think that's an excellent point for sure. Atlas, do you have some thoughts about that language piece? Have you heard kids talking about any of this in support group? And what other ways parents may be able to lean into having these conversations that feel really hard to have?
I have not necessarily heard our youth talking about isolation or withdrawal. Maybe in the Discord, they're more open to putting that when they're venting or something. Um, but I know that some of them might be aware that they are not interacting as much as they would even like to, or sometimes that's just how they prefer to do things. But usually those youth, I feel that they are not as connected to their parents as they would want to, or maybe they're not even out to their parents. So it does become difficult there when it's a youth that is not out and is not able to express themselves, is not able to um, express their um, physical appearance in the way that they would like. So yeah, I feel that it does get even harder for some of the youth who tend to isolate, especially when they don't have that support at home.
I'm so glad you brought up the Discord channel, because that's one of the pieces we're talking about, right? Our kids tend to connect far more over the internet than they do in face to face with people, and having things like the Discords that we have for middle school, high school, and young adult up to age 30, being able to have that instant connection on the phone. It's right there all the time. And there's plenty of gaming that people do that too, but that piece of you know for me as a parent, recognizing that Discord isn't any different than me picking up the phone and calling somebody, right? Which is what I would do if I was challenged or having a hard time, I'm going to call a friend and help kind of walk through it. And our kids can do it just by texting or by jumping onto a Discord. And so it isn't any different. Um, it just the platform looks a little bit different for sure. So, Pam, is there anything else you would like to share as this seems like a base of support for this family? And I know both you and Kelly did support groups in the beginning, and what maybe that was, how helpful that might have been, or what that was like for either of you. Both of you can respond to that.
Well, since Kelly's looking at me, I'll go ahead and respond. It was wonderful being in a community, even if it was just for an hour, of people. And there were other grandparents there too over time, not all the time, but once in a while. But just being in that community, I felt understood, related to how I was supporting the family emotionally, physically being with them and everything. So just that presence was so reinforcing. Um, the other thing I've learned, and this is kind of surprising me because this just came up. Tracy, I looked at the list of do these things to maintain contact and stuff with your youth. Yesterday or last night, a woman called me and said, my daughter, I don't know what to do. She thinks I don't prioritize her because she teaches and very, very busy. So I took your ideas, Tracy, and said, why don't you kind of grow up some of the ideas instead of a little sticky something, maybe something else, or spend some time in your daughter's room. So the reason I'm mentioning this is that the skills that I've learned interacting with transgender world and my granddaughter and my daughter and everybody, they're applicable to every parent-child relationship, and even parent to parent, right? I send jokes to Kelly and stuff, so I haven't asked for feedback about that to see if it's funny or not.
We'll talk later. That's such a good point, though. I mean, I completely agree with that. I'm so lucky that we have the support of my mom. But along those lines, too, I would just say it's been very important for me to learn how to do self-care instead of obsessing about what my youth is, doing or not doing, and, all of that, to make myself a very healthy person, healthy parent, for just because I need to anyway. But I really don't think I would have gone to the lengths I do to take care of myself if it weren't for my transgender youth. I've learned so much about how to live life in a healthy, open, loving, unconditionally way. And I mean, look at our relationship. I mean, only good has come from it, but of course during and being in the middle of it and asking how long it'll take, that's a whole other thing. But I'm glad to be on the other side right now, and I can definitely say that, seeing Atlas and everything you're doing, I mean, it gives me so much hope. And I think that, just being in the community has been essential.
Thank you, Kelly. That's a great lead off to our closing question here. So often when we talk about our trans loved ones, and in particular our youth, there's so much effort and energy that's put around mental health and the struggle and dysphoria and the challenges, and life's hard. And we really have to highlight far more in this community that piece of joy, that piece of like what you were talking about, like what it's taught you, how you can celebrate, what gender euphoria can look like, and how can we participate in that with our kids. So that's going to be my question to each of you, is either sharing a moment where you did get to participate, or a suggestion of how to participate in that moment of trans joy with your kid. So, Tracy, let's start with you this time.
Oh my goodness. Gosh, I'm thinking about just the trans joy that shows up with my clients in when they're sharing something exciting about their lives, and it's not even related necessarily to overcoming or being worried about identity. It's about just fully celebrating and talking about, oh, my friend talked about how I looked so good in my band uniform and my suit this week, and just things like that, where it's just a moment of joy and trying to highlight that and ask more about it. I think with youth, especially when they're feeling confident about something, like digging into that as much as possible and highlighting those things instead of, like you said, Kathy, all the rough stuff that's happening. There's plenty of trans joy to be had if that's what we're also looking for.
Awesome. Kelly and Pam.
Oh gosh, there have been so many moments lately, I think, where there's just been so much. I mean, there's been so many along the way, but I would say most recently, probably just a couple of weeks ago when she graduated from college and wrote me, I'm going to cry, the most touching card about everything that we've been through together as a family and how we got to this point where she's able to be more out in the world. I think that was just an absolute moment of pure joy. And but there are many more to come. It's very exciting.
That's beautiful. Pam?
For me, it's like I pickpocket the joyful moments in a way because my granddaughter lives with me, so I get to see her once in a while. It's a wonderful arrangement for both of us because I'm getting older. Anyway, she'll come over. We have dinner together once a week, and she'll mention something kind of in passing that worked for her, and I'll jump on it. And I'll say, wow, that was great. How did you end up doing that? And what felt good about it? That kind of thing. I think she didn't like that for a long time. That's what my assumption is. Actually, no, I asked her, do you get irritated when I point out, fun, good stuff? And she said, no, I was kind of surprised, actually. But I try to do that. I look for those moments that reflect joy and progress and love. So
That's beautiful. Atlas, do you want to share a piece of trans joy that you have had or got to share with one of the youth you work with?
I really wanted to share something that it wasn't necessarily trans joy, but it was joyous for me. It happened last week. So, last week was my niece's birthday party, and I got to go home and be around my family. So I got to see my mom, and my mom has always been kind of my only person who I desire support from explicitly, and it's just she was the first person that I had to explain what I was going through and ask for understanding and constantly ask for that support and constant nagging and correcting. And I just had a really huge sense of mutual support last week that I heard her talking to my cousin about just being or treating her mom better, and understanding what she's experiencing, her health concerns, and why she should show up more for her. And I was just hearing them talking in the background, but there was a moment where she goes like, "Do you know who the person that understands me the most is?" And she points towards me with her eyes, and I'm just like right there. I was just done because it's just that mutual support, that feeling just brought me a lot of joy because my mom really became one of the persons who tried their best to understand me and support me, and hearing that I'm that for her as well, just it fills my heart with so much love, so much joy. Uh, so if there's anything that I would want our youth to experience is that same feeling, that mutual support from a parent.
That is absolutely beautiful, Atlas. Thank you for sharing that very intimate moment that you got to have with your mom. That's beautiful. Just in closing this out, uh, we at Trans Family Support Services believe very much that the trans person isn't really transitioning. They're just aligning themselves with who they know themselves to be. And so a lot of our work is working with the people who really are in transition, which is the parents and the people around the trans individual. So if you are not already connected to us, please reach out, check out our website, join one of our support groups. Your youth may not be interested at this point in joining a support group. They might be interested in joining Discord. That's okay. You can come on board, get the support that you need so that, like Kelly talked about, Kelly and Pam were the big supports for their kiddo. And we were able to wrap our arms around the two of them to help give them the support they needed to help their kid to be able to get to this place of thriving that she is. I had the honor and pleasure 2 days ago to finally meet her after 7 years of never having met her, and seeing her thriving was just that was a great joy for sure. So thank you all so much for your time and attention. Tracy, thank you for the great tips that we'll be sharing out for a long time with our parents. Pam and Kelly, thank you both for sharing the intimate details of your family with us and to be able to help others. And Atlas, as always, the service you give to our youth and families is very much appreciated. So have a great day, everybody.